Anyway, it is an honor to have with us Coach Dan Reeves. Coach, come and share with us tonight.
Thanks. I'm going to kind of update that a little bit. My wife and I have been married 49 years. And we got 7 grandchildren. We're blessed this past February with another granddaughter. So we got 6 granddaughters and 1 grandson now. So we're truly blessed. But I told Mike earlier that used to say that it'd be nice to have those grandkids first, but their motors are a little too fast for you when you get this old. They can outlast you. But it is a pleasure to be here and to see this many people here tonight. And I can see after you got all these drawings and contests and so forth that you got here, I'd be here too. So just appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. I was thinking about what to say, and I got to thinking about this story I heard about the little grandson that was going to church this particular Sunday with his granddad. And this preacher at this church was known for his long sermons. I mean, he could, get to preaching and go on and on and on. And so the granddaddy made sure he told his grandson, said, "Son, now I want you to be quiet. Don't be squirming around in your seat. You be still and you listen to what the preacher's got to say." So sure enough, the preacher got up there and he started preaching, and he did. He went on and on and on. And the little grandson was trying his best to be still, and just went too long. And he started squirming a little bit, and sure enough, his granddaddy reached over and bam, thumped him upside the head. Thought everybody in church had heard it. He kind of be still again, and the preacher kept going on and on and on. And finally, the kid's eyes started wandering around. He looked around, and he saw these flags behind the preacher, and he turned to his granddaddy. He said, "Granddaddy," he said, "what are those flags behind the preacher?" And his granddaddy looked up there, and he turned back and he said, "Son," said, "that's to commemorate our men who died in service." And he said, "Is that the 9 o'clock or the 11 o'clock service?" I decided that I don't want to be too long, but I do want to cover some things that I think be important for you to hear about my life, and a little bit about my story. I got to tell you, before I start telling some of these stories, I had the heart surgery back in quadruple bypass back in '98, and since that time, I've always been a little bit sensitive, but since that time, I mean, I can cry at a heartbeat. I told somebody it's sort of like Roadrunner cartoon. I see a lot of you old enough to know, like I am, what a Roadrunner was. But when you hit the fork in the road, I could cry. So I may get a little bit choked up a little bit of some of the stories that I tell, but I think they're important to try to get across. Mike told you I was raised down in Americus, Georgia. Just listening a little bit about what's been said tonight. I thought it was important to talk a little bit about, my family. My dad was the oldest in his family of 7 children. He only finished the 3rd grade. His mom passed away when he was in the 3rd grade, and him being the oldest one, he had to quit school and, kind of help out at home. And so he only had a 3rd grade education. And like I said, I was raised on a 285-acre farm between Americus and Andersonville. And we had a lot of chores that we had to do there on the farm. We had everything you think of: hogs, cows, peanuts, corn, wheat, oats. We had it all. And had a lot of, things that we had to do. My dad also, he and his brother started a road construction business. And I actually started with the HD5 Alice Chandler bulldozer, grading and clearing land and building fish ponds. That's how they got started. And my dad, was an alcoholic. And, I can remember early when I was young, my mom would send us on seek and destroy missions. Going out throughout our house, throughout the smokehouse, throughout a crib that we had there, looking for whiskey bottles, full of whiskey and throwing them away, hiding them, trying to keep them away from my dad, because my dad sometimes would, on Fridays, start drinking, and, we might not see him again until Monday or Tuesday. And so he had a bad problem. And my mom was great. She got, the 4 kids. I had two brothers and a sister. And, she'd make sure that we still, every Sunday went to Sunday school and church. I told somebody one time I had a drug problem when I was little. And my mom drug us to Sunday school, drug us to church, BTU, whatever they had at church, she drug us there. And, never really thought a whole lot about it, but my dad got to a point with his alcohol problem that he really, doctor told him, you keep drinking, you're going to die. And so he went, got some help, went to AA meetings, got cured, ended up taking a Dale Carnegie course, and ended up being, Sunday school superintendent. And that was, unbelievable. That there goes that little road runner across there. But, it took a lot of guts, for him to do it. And so I could see, what as a young man, what the Lord, did for my dad. So, accepted, Christ at an early age. Went to a little country Baptist church, Bethel Baptist Church, way out in the country. And, I used to participate in everything. If you work on a farm, you get up about 4:30 every morning, and that's what we did. My dad would come down the hall, and he said, it ain't daylight, but it's 4 o'clock, hit the floor. And you had to get up and go feed the hogs and cows, even, before church and everything, before school, and, catch a school bus. And so we had, a lot of things that we, had to do. But being raised on a farm gives you, a lot of things to learn from. And I love, being on a farm. But I also would like to find a way to get off of it. And one of that was having RA, Royal Ambassador, which they had in the Baptist church. And so I passed every rank you could pass. Because if you passed the rank, you could go to camp. And that was a week in the summer that I didn't have to work on that farm. and so I learned a lot of scripture, in RAs, and ended up going to camp at Camp Pinnacle. Ended up going down to camp down in Brunswick when they first started one there. And I participated in sword drills. I don't know whether they still have it or not. When I got married, my father-in-law told me I could marry his daughter under one condition. And I said, oh my goodness, what is that? And he said, well, that you become a Methodist. He said, I lost one of my daughters to a Baptist preacher, and I'm not losing another one to a Baptist. So I said, no problem. So I don't know whether they still have it or not, but, did sword drill. And I learned, all about books of the Bible, and ended up winning the fellowship, sword drill. So, I was raised in a church, and my mom and dad were very active there, and I was very fortunate, growing up, that way. I ended up going to, as Mike said, to the University of South Carolina. Many people ask me, why in the world did you go to South Carolina? Well, it was real simple. It was the only school offered me a scholarship, and I signed it real quick before they changed their mind. And I was truly blessed, to go to the University of South Carolina. And while I was at the University of South Carolina, I had an opportunity when I was a freshman to go to FCA meeting, the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And they had a guy named Bob Richards that was going to speak at this FCA banquet. And I wanted to go because Bob Richards, some of you around my age will remember, Bob Richards was the first man that I knew of that won a gold medal in the Olympics. He had won it in the pole vault event. And I wanted to hear this, person that won a gold medal. And I remember going and listening to him, and he told a story that really had a tremendous impact on my life. And he told a true story about a young man who was highly recruited, coming out of high school, and ended up going to Columbia University and playing for a coach named Lou Little. And while he was in Columbia University, he had been one of the most highly recruited kids out of high school. And yet here he was in his senior year at Columbia University, and he'd never started a single game because he hadn't put forth that extra effort that he needed to show, the type of talent that he had. And about mid-season of his senior year, the young man's father passed away. And Coach Little got the call, and he called the young man in his office, and he told him the sad news. And he told him, he said, "Son, go home. When everything's all right at home, you can come back." So the young man went home, and he came back on Friday before a game on Saturday. And he went to see Coach Little, and he said, "Coach, I want you to start me tomorrow." And of course, Coach Little said, "Son, I can't do that. There's too many guys that put forth a greater effort than you have, and I can't put you in front of them." He said, "Well, Coach, please, just put me in the game somehow." So Coach Little told him he'd think about it. And the next day, Columbia University kicked off to the opposing team. And this young man was put in on kickoff coverage. And he was the first one downfield. He made a tremendous tackle in the open field. And so it kind of impressed Coach Little. So as the game went on, he worked him in on offense, and he was a running back. And sure enough, this young man ran with the football like Coach Little knew he had the ability to do. He made some fantastic runs. He put him in on defense, and this young man made tackles all over the field. He was a defensive back. Broke up several passes. He was one of the reasons that they won the football game. So when the game was over, he called the young man in his office. And he said, "Son, I knew you had this ability." He said, "But I don't understand." He said, "Why in the world did you wait until today to show me?" And the kid looked up and had tears coming down his face. And he said, "Coach," he said, "you knew that my father passed away." He said, "But there's one thing you didn't know." He said, "My father was blind." And he said, "That's the first football game that he's ever seen me play."
Amen.
Now, the point that Bob Richards was trying to make was that our Heavenly Father sees what we do every single day of our life. And just think what kind of impression you could make upon people if you tried a little bit harder to be as good a Christian as you could be. As this young man tried to prove how good a football player he was to his father. So that made an impression on me. I mean, I was a quarterback. I knew kids, looked up to football players in particular, but quarterbacks for sure. And I wanted to try to be this, right kind of example, for them. When I went to college and through the time I went to the Dallas Cowboys, I was signed as a free agent, as Mike said, and that was back when a free agent meant free. Okay. $1,000 signing bonus, and $11,000 contract. I had gotten married before my senior year at the University of South Carolina to my wife Pam, and we were expecting our first child. And so I really needed to, to make the football team real bad. I knew that if I didn't make it, I could go back and work in the farm or in the construction business, but I wanted to play pro football, something I'd dreamed about since I was a little kid. And so I tried, as hard as I could, and I ended up playing for a coach named Tom Landry, who was the finest Christian, not only a great coach, but one of the finest Christian men you could possibly play for. And Coach Landry asked me if I would speak at an Easter sunrise service in Gatesville, Texas at the State Reform School for Boys. And I told him I'd be glad to, and I went down, and I'll never forget, being there at that Easter sunrise service, as they marched 870-something kids in front of me. Blue jean denim jackets between the ages of 8 and 15 years old. First few rows were all 8-year-old kids. And I remember thinking to myself, what in the world can a kid 8 years old do wrong to be in a reform school? And when the service was over, I found out from the pastor there that over 83% of the kids in that reform school came from broken homes. Now, I was fortunate I had a mom and dad who loved me and cared enough about me. They drugged me to Sunday school and church, as I told you, so that I had an ability to learn the difference between right and wrong. There were a lot of these kids that didn't know the difference in right and wrong. They were following and looking up to guys that they thought were great role models, and they would lead them down the wrong path. So they didn't have the advantage that I had. They probably, if they'd have had a mom and dad with just a little bit of money, could have had a lawyer where they wouldn't be put in a situation like that. So I realized then I was, very fortunate. I started in 1966 for the Dallas Cowboys at running back. We got beat in 1966 and 1967 by the Green Bay Packers, and the right to go to Super Bowl I in 66 and 67. There was the right to go to Super Bowl II. 1968, I was running a sweep around the right end against the St. Louis Cardinals. I was behind this big guard, 6'4", 230, 330, excuse me, not 230, 330. And I got too close to him. He got, knocked back into the backfield when he pulled. And I couldn't see around him. And I knew I had that ball on my arm. It attracts the wrong kind of people. And I knew I had to get out from behind him. And so I planted my left foot to cut out from behind him. And just as I did, a defensive back came underneath him and caught my left knee, fully planted, and tore everything you can tear in your left knee. So believe me, I wasn't laying on the ground saying, "Thank you, Lord, this is the greatest blessing that ever happened to me." But it was. I ended up, having my knee redone. Played the next year, but got beat out by a young man named Calvin Hill, who was Rookie of the Year, and I knew my career was coming to an end. And Coach Tom Landry asked me if I'd be interested in being a player coach. I thought about it. I said, players get cut, but I never heard of a player getting fired. And I heard of coaches getting fired, but I never heard of a coach getting cut. So I thought, I got a couple of chances here, so never thought about coaching. But I thought this is something I want to do, and I did. I became a player coach in 1970, and we went to our first Super Bowl in 1970. And I thought, this is great. Next year, 1971, my second year as a player coach, we ended up winning the Super Bowl, beating the Miami Dolphins in New Orleans. And I thought, this is a great profession. So enjoyed being a player coach for 3 years, and then I coached in 1971. I coached a young man named Dwayne Thomas, and Dwayne Thomas was Rookie of the Year. Great running back, and it was fun to coach. Something happened between year 1 to year 2. He wanted to negotiate his contract again. Went out to California and got hooked on something. I don't know what it was, but he was a different young man when he came back. Wouldn't answer the roll. Said, well, you can see me there. I don't have to answer the roll. So we had to quit calling the roll. I'm coaching him, so in our meetings, I'm watching film and speaking to the running back saying, what do you do on this play now if you have this situation? I couldn't ask questions because he wouldn't answer. So I went through the whole season like that, and I said, I don't have to deal with this. I would get rid of him, let him go. Coach Landry saw, the ability to make something out of him. Kept him around, just made, even though we won the world championship that year, that was a miserable year for me. And I said, you don't have to deal with those kind of problems. So I got out of coaching, went into a private business with a real estate man who was building townhouses. And he put me in charge of complaints. We were building 100 townhouses. All of a sudden I had 100 Dwayne Thomases. And they showed me, regardless of what you do in life, there are going to be problems. And your ability to deal with it is going to be determined how successful you might be. So that was a great lesson for me. So when I went back, coached with the Cowboys the next year, Coach Landry hired me back. And I ended up coaching in 1981. I went to the Denver Broncos as head coach. One of the first people that I tried to hire was my college coach, Coach Marvin Bass, who's one of the finest men like Coach Landry. I was very fortunate. When I was in high school, I had a coach named Jimmy Hightower, who's in the Hall of Fame, the Georgia Hall of Fame. He's one of the great coaches. Coached me in both football and in basketball. We won state championship in basketball. So he was just a great coach. And Coach Hightower just passed away last year. Went to his funeral. So I tried to hire Coach Bass, and Coach Bass was up in Canada. And believe me, if you're an NFL coach and you call somebody from Canada and ask him to come join your staff, I'd be there the next day. But not Coach Bass. He said, look, I told these people that I would coach for them. I'm going to keep my word. He said, now if you have a job opening next year, I'd love to be on your staff. And Coach Bass joined my staff the next year, was with us the whole time we were in Denver. Unfortunately, his wife had a stroke our last year in Denver. And he went back to Columbia, South Carolina to be with her and help her. And couldn't go with us when we went to New York. So he wasn't with us in New York. While we were in New York, she passed away. And so when I got to Atlanta, his son Randy called me and he said, you know, Coach, Dad's just waiting to die. He said, since Mother passed away, he just didn't have any reason. He just hangs around and does nothing. Could you call him? So I called Coach Bass and asked him if he would come down and, you know, visit us at, you know, in Atlanta. And he said, oh, you don't need me. You know, I said, no, I do, Coach. I want you to come down. You're going to know everybody on our staff, and I want you to come down and be a part of it. So he came down to visit and never went back. We got him a hotel room there in Swanee, right next to our facility, and you couldn't beat him to work. I mean, if you got there at 5 o'clock in the morning, he was already there. I don't care. You got there at 4:30, he was already out. I don't know what time he came, but whatever time you got there, he was always there. And worked extremely hard. I've always said that, you know, whatever business you're in, you need somebody to tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. And Coach Bass, you know, was that for me. Coach Bass was with us, with me in Atlanta. Did a great job, and when I got, you know, fired, he retired. He was in his late 80s, 88 or 89 years old, oldest coach in the NFL. A couple of years ago, I got a call from his daughter-in-law and said, you know, Coach, you know, wants to see you. And so I hung up the phone and I told my wife, and she said, well, you need to come because he's telling you goodbye. And so I went up to see Coach Bass, and you know, I got to see him a few days before he passed away. And when I went to you know, his funeral, I had a viewing, and Debbie, his daughter-in-law, was there, and she said, you know, Dad only wanted a few things. Said he wanted his wedding band. Said I found his wedding band. Said he wanted his Bible, and said to put his Bible in the casket, and he wanted his glasses. And I said, well, could I see, you know, his Bible? And so I did. Got his Bible, and when you go through it, every page, you know, had lines highlighted, pages, you know, kind of torn from being open, you know, so much, every single page. And the next day, when I had a lady pastor that did his service, and she said, you know, if you show me a man whose Bible is all torn up, she said, I'll show you someone's life who's not. And that was Coach Bass. So I was very fortunate to have had a high school coach and a college coach. It was like, you know, second dads to me. And Coach Landry, you know, was the same way. I was with Coach Landry for 16 years. 16 of the greatest years of my life, because not only did he show me and teach me a lot about football, he showed me how to be a Christian, how to be a great Christian man. It was a great example in everything that he did, how he handled people, how he handled different situations. And when I got the job with the Denver Broncos, he called me in his office and he said, Dan, I've only got 2 pieces of advice for you. He said, first of all, he said, be yourself. He said, because if you're not yourself, he said, people will pick up on a phony quicker than anything. And he said, second of all, he said, always tell the truth. He said, because if you don't tell the truth, how you gonna ever remember what you said? You know, two great pieces of advice, because so many times, particularly in the coaching profession, you ask so many questions about players and how you handling this, how you handling that. And that's great. If you tell the truth, you don't have a problem. You can remember what you said. But if you don't, you can have a tough time trying to answer questions. So I was fortunate. I had, three great coaches, had a great, mom and dad that helped me through life. After I tore my knee up with the Dallas Cowboys and got beat out, I was asked to go to Vietnam to visit our troops in Vietnam. Don Meredith, our quarterback, had been the year before and told me what a great experience it was and asked me that, he said, you need to go. It'll be one of the greatest things you ever did. And I did that. Went to Vietnam, 21 days visiting troops, going from, one hospital to another hospital to the camps, seeing young men with eyes missing, arms missing, legs missing. And it was right after I just tore my knee up and I was feeling sorry for myself. And after seeing those young men who were just glad to be alive, to be able to go back home, see their mom, their dad, their wife, their kids. And here I was feeling sorry for myself because I was, missing some football because of my knee injury. I came back and told my wife, I said, "Sure, if you ever see me feel sorry for myself, please kick me right in the rear end. Because it doesn't make any difference who you are or how bad you have it. Somebody somewhere else has got it worse than you do. Amen. So just be thankful, for what you do have." Let me just, close with this. I had a story that got several years ago, and I use it every now and then because it, to me, tells a great story. But it's about a man and his son over in Europe. The man had one of the greatest art collections in the world. I mean, people all over the world who were in the art business knew about this man's collection, knew what a great collection he had. The thing that made it so much fun with him was that he had his son who got interested in art too. And they were working in art together, going to different places, buying great pieces of art, by Monet, Renoir, all of the great artists, Van Gogh. He had them all. And about that time, the war broke out, World War II broke out. And the young man, went to serve his country. And all of a sudden, after being there, his dad gets a call that his son has been killed. So he's grieving his son, that he's lost his son. He hears a knock on his door several weeks later. He goes to the door and there's a young man there who has a package. It's a soldier. And he said, "Can I come in?" And he said, "Sure, come in." He said, "I'm the young man that your son was trying to save when he got shot and killed." And he said, "He told me so many times about the love of art that you and he had." And he said, "I want to give this to you." And he presented a portrait, of his son. And he said, "I'm not a good artist, but I want you to have this portrait." And his dad looked at the portrait of his son, and it captured the essence of his son so well. And he said, "Well, let me pay for it." He said, "No, you don't owe me anything. Your son gave his life for me." So he took the painting, and he took down his painting over his fireplace. Real famous painting. He took it down and put the painting of his son, and every day looked at the picture, of that son. And he just loved the picture because it captured his son so well. Several months later, the dad passed away. Well, people around the world heard about it because he had such a tremendous collection, and they were going to have an auction of all of the paintings that he had, the great artwork. So people came from all over the world. And so they got there, and the auctioneer stood up. He said, "The first piece that we're going to sell here is a picture of the son." And Somebody said, "Oh man, come on, get to the good stuff. We didn't come here for the pictures, you know, the sun. Give us the good stuff." He said, "No." He said, "Who'll give me $50? $50 for the painting." And people going upset. You could tell, "Hey, get the good stuff. We don't care about that." He said, "No. Who'll give me $10? Is somebody give me $10? And finally, a man in the back who happened to be the gardener said, "I'll give you $10 for the painting." He said, "Okay, we got 10. Somebody give me 20. Anybody give me 20? $10 here. We got 10. Give me 20. Anybody give me 20?" He said, "Come on, man. Sell the thing. We want to get on to the good stuff." So he said, "Okay, fine. We got $10 going once, $10 going twice. Sold for $10. And they said, "Okay, great. Now we can get on to the good stuff." And the auctioneer said, "No." Said there was a stipulation in the will that said I couldn't tell you about it, but whoever takes the sun gets the whole thing. So the gardener, you know, got the sun. But isn't that the way it is? If we take the sun, we get the whole thing.